I want to draw a robot, and because of that, I decided to try something new, because as an artist you should always try out new things, and one of the new things I started experimenting with is, instead of drawing the robot, I end up using different tones of a single color to get the rough shape and idea of what I want the robot to look like. Anytime you illustrate a character, you end up just drawing out the character, combining shapes, but with this one, I've seen that many illustrators that illustrate robots or characters for that matter end up using shapes to get the silhouette first before they start the sketching phase. So I decided to take it upon myself by drawing out the shape before I started illustrating the robot and kind of drawing the robot. So I decided to use different tones of red to rough out the shape, and then after I rough out the shape I start sketching. I find robots quite fascinating. Creating a sentient being out of metal, it's quite an interesting thing to think about. And as our technology is progressing and people are innovating and engineers are creating newer and newer electronics, it's quite cool that in the future we can be expecting robots. Because if you have heard of ChatGPT or AI, people have created AI that's so powerful that it makes you feel like you're talking to an actual person, and when it was released to the public, people were going crazy on YouTube. There's still people going crazy about the entire concept, but I think the concept that really struck the hardest was AI art. When AI art was released, it was literally you could just type in whatever you want and it will create the image you want by using other artists' artwork to just create whatever it wants. And I found it very interesting how we now have technology where you could just create any image you want just by typing in what you want, and then that robot can create the image. But it doesn't do it on its own. It takes other images made by actual artists and reuses those images and creates its own unique images by using other drawings that other artists have created. And the company that ended up using this technology and using the art actually didn't ask for any permission to actually use the images. So the company that created the AI software and the ability for the software to use other images to regenerate new images, they actually haven't got any copyright law to actually use the images, so they're actually committing a crime by using the images even though they're not allowed to, because none of the artists have actually agreed to actually allowing the company to use the artworks. So they use artworks from Pinterest, Google, and they're using images that you need a license to own or you need to buy those images, and the company hasn't really done that. And I find it quite sketchy, but I don't think in the future ChatGPT will really be used to create new artworks and illustrations, because at the end of the day it's using other images to create new artworks, while actual illustrators spend all their life learning anatomy and the skeleton structure of a person to create an image with perfect anatomy, and AI can't do that. It's not capable of really creating a perfect image. Of course, over time the company will figure out ways to make their AI powerful enough to learn anatomy and know how everything works, but at the meantime it's not at a state of being perfect. And in the future I don't believe robots will take over our jobs, because it needs to use images from actual artists who spend all their time working on those artworks, and legally they're not allowed to use the images. But of course they can get away with it for a short period of time because they are doing science, and when it comes to science you're allowed to use the resources even though you may not have permission to use said resources. I may be wrong with that statement, but ChatGPT is experimental software, and especially the art side of ChatGPT, they're just experimenting and studying if it's able to do it, so the company doesn't really have to worry about getting permission from other artists. but I don't think they're really gonna go that far and take over the jobs of all artists. I may be wrong, and probably in the next 20 years there'll be a robot that will steal my future job. I will never know, but the only thing I guess we can do about it is hope it doesn't happen. I find robots extremely awesome, but if you compare a fictional robot to a real life one, you can see the difference between both of them. Don't get me wrong, the technology is extremely advanced and the way they just work is just crazy, and there are many companies that are devoting all their time and resources to making robots, but there's quite a lot of issues with making them. They are extremely expensive. Making a robot requires a lot of metal, motors, wires, and giving it a brain and programming, and it just takes a lot of effort to make a robot. But when making a robot, you have to worry about the metal adding tons of stress and worry about weak points, and just making them is quite difficult. You have to take into consideration the weight, the motors, and all that jazz when it comes to making them. There's a lot of problems and issues and a lot of stress testing. And if you don't know what stress testing is, it's basically you intentionally try breaking something to see if there's any issues. Like, for example, you end up bending the arm as far as possible to see if it's able to move as fluently. So stress testing can be quite an annoying thing when it comes to engineering for many engineers. But robots are still the most coolest concept ever, and I can't wait to see what it looks like in the future and how powerful they are. I've heard that Elon Musk is trying to make security robots that can do all the hard labor jobs that people absolutely hate, like building houses, exploring unknown areas, and just picking up heavy objects and moving them to each place. Like many companies like Amazon end up hiring workers to move heavy packages from one place to the other. Elon Musk wants to invent robots that would do that for you. I tried out coding, but there was a few problems I ran into. I had no idea how to code, so I ended up downloading the program and ended up watching a whole bunch of YouTube tutorials teaching myself how to code. I tried out coding, but then when I hopped into the program and tried coding my first game, I had all the assets. I ran into another problem. I can't read and write. So you may be asking, why can't you read and write? Well, the reason is I'm autistic. If you didn't know, I have autism, and one of the things about autism is I couldn't read and write. But autism is quite different for many people. Some people can't read and write, some people are non-verbal. Autism works like that. Anyone with autism is completely different than the other person, so when people tried studying autism, they ended up becoming really confused. But anyway, when I tried out coding, I couldn't read and write, so that was quite a bummer on my part. But the thing is that probably one day I may make friends with a game developer or a person who's good at coding, and I can create the art assets and the world building while he does the coding, and me and him can collaborate on a video game. But I'll have to see what the future will behold and what the future will be like for me. The funny thing is that even if you devote your time into doing something, the future always turns out way different than you envisioned. as well illustrating these robots, I wanted to give them purpose, because as you create characters, you want to give the characters purpose and give them a meaning for existing, especially robots. So with these robots, the purpose I ended up giving them was them being war robots. But one of my favorite war robots I was working on in this piece was the Spider Legs. The reason why I ended up liking him the most is because this character for me just had the most amount of purpose. I gave him a railgun on his chest and I gave him a unique design. And the reason I ended up putting the railgun on his chest, the technical reason is when he shoots the railgun, it creates a lot of knockback and resistance, so he has it attached to his chest to prevent a large amount of the recoil. And of course I gave him the spider legs to prevent even more recoil, so he can be able to snipe his opponents without falling over. And I found this design choice really cool, and I found these robots to be one of my favorites. I don't really have that many favorite designs because I draw a lot. And of course, having favorite designs, you end up criteriaing all the mistakes and all the difference in the design. Like when you design a character or just design anything in general, many artists do not like the design because they see all the mistakes and all the errors, while other people see only the perfections. Because as an artist, you spend a lot of time drawing and a lot of time criteriating your art and a lot of time, you know, creating the character. So sometimes you could just look at the art for hours while drawing it and you just look at all the mistakes and do not see that many of the perfections. I just want to say thank you so much for watching the video, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.